Hi, everyone. Welcome to the April 17th edition of the TimeformUS forecast. I'm David Aragonin. I'll be joined very shortly by my co-host, Craig Milkowski. This week on the podcast, we're going to handicap the late pick 5 at Oaklawn on Saturday. This card features a couple of pretty interesting stakes races, the Grade 3 Count Fleet going 6 furlongs for the sprinters, and the centerpiece of the card, the Grade 1 Apple Blossom, going 1 mile and 1/16 for the older fillies and mares. 14 horses signed on for that race, so many to discuss. We'll get there, but there are 3 non-stakes races in the sequence, and they're all pretty interesting races. Craig, we handicapped the late pick 4 at Oaklawn last week, and while I don't think I was able to string together any kind of ticket that was successful, we gave out some pretty good ideas, so hopefully we can do it again.
Yeah, I look forward to it. It was a strong card. One thing for sure is these Oaklawn cards, with there being so little racing, every race is just full big fields, competitive. So, I mean, these are not easy races, and they're a real challenge for the handicapper.
Yeah, that's definitely true. And let's start by diving in with the 7th race. It's the first leg of this late pick 5 sequence. We'll talk about races 7 through 11 on this card. The 7th is arguably one of the easiest races we're going to talk about. There's a favorite in this race, the number 5 Desmond, who's coming in for Bob Baffert. And Bob Baffert is a trainer that I think you always have to respect when he ships into Oaklawn Park. He's got an excellent record doing that. Desmond showed some class last season as a 3-year-old. He was second by a nose in the San Vicente, but he's facing some other rivals with back class in this race. I think, though, what might give Desmond an advantage is the lack of pace in this race.
Yeah, on our pace projector, it's a race where despite the big field of 10, the pace projector still shows that the race favors horses early on or near the lead, and he's the one on a clear lead. So I do think he is the horse to beat. He's the morning line favorite. He has the best last race speed figure on TimeformUS, so I think he's clearly the horse to beat. You could make a case for some others in here. I do want to mention Everfast, who I had already forgotten was the runner-up in last year's Preakness behind War of Will, I guess it was. Yeah, man, how the time has flown. But yeah, I had forgotten his name. He's in here, but he's one of the contingent of horses who look like they could win, but they just have no early speed. Horses like Comedian, Soaring Bird, and some others in here. So I do really think Desmond is the one to beat. I think the logical alternative would be the second choice on the morning line, Wild Poppet. He's stretching out to 1 mile for the first time. He is by Tappet, but I'm a little leery on him because there's not a whole lot of breeding on the female side at all. So not sure where to go with him, and did want to hear your thoughts on that one.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you about Desmond. I think he's going to be pretty tough to reel in this race, especially if the pace projector is correct. And you have to think it will be. Bob Baffert's putting the blinkers back on, so I guess the intention is to show a bit more speed. People will see that the last time he ran at Oaklawn as a 3-year-old in his 3rd career start, he came from well off the pace that day. If you go back and watch that race, though, he just stood in the starting gate when they opened the stalls, left the gate about 3 lengths behind that field. He was definitely best that day and probably was hindered by not being able to implement his usual running style. So don't put too much stock in that race if you're thinking he's not going to show speed in this race. I think he will. I agree about Everfast. He got good for I guess the span of a month last year between the Preakness and the Belmont Stakes, earning a couple of TimeformUS speed figures in the 120 range, which is higher than anybody else in this field has run. And if he gets back to that form, Everfast is going to win. But Joe Rosario gave him an absolutely perfect ride in that Preakness, and he was also riding that rail bias on Belmont Day. So I don't know. Those performances seem like they were just like he caught lightning in a bottle, and he has gone off form since then. The pace works against him. He wasn't really for me in this race. Wild Poppet is the interesting horse. He's coming off a pretty impressive maiden victory, going 6 furlongs last month. And if you watch that race, I mean, on the turn, it just didn't look like he was going to get there because he was kind of idling. Once Stuart Elliott steered him out into the clear, though, he really kicked in well. Finished up like a horse that shouldn't have trouble with added distance. And as you said, he's by Tappet. While there's no immediate pedigree from his dam is out of Flanders, that Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies winner from the mid-90s. And so that makes the dam a half to Surfside, who was a multiple Grade 1 winning dirt router. So there is definitely dirt route pedigree going deeper into the female family. The one negative that I found is if you look up Randy Morse's stats, with horses stretching out to a route for the first time on dirt in DRF Formulator. Over the past 5 years, he's just 2 for 49, a 4% win rate with a 25% ROI. So not really a strong move with stretch outs for this barn. The horse that I would take a shot with at a price here is the number 3 locally owned. I don't know if we're going to get the 15-1 that he is on the morning line, because I kind of thought he was the more appealing of the 2 Al Stall horses, even though the morning line kind of has them reversed. I know that locally owned showed potential early on and really hasn't gone on now as a 4-year-old, but he's only routed a couple of times in his career. And I think he deserves another shot to stretch out, because the first time that he went long as a 2-year-old in November, he caught War of Will, who was just better than him that day. And then the next time that he went long, he kind of broke awkwardly at the fairgrounds in December of 2018. Sean Bridgman, let's just say that he didn't really ride him to win that day, so I don't want to put too much stock in that race. And this horse is really bred to go longer. He's out of 50 Shades of Hay, who you might remember for Bob Baffert. She won the Black Eyed Susan a number of years ago, was a confirmed dirt router. And I just think locally owned could be close to the pace here if he has a little bit of speed on the stretch out. And he just feels like one that could get a bit lost in the shuffle when I want to take a shot with him at a price.
The only other notes I had on this race, I wanted to mention Wild Poppet's win last time has proven to be a strong race. It's already had 2 winners come out of it. The runner-up Edgemont Road came back to win a nice maiden special weight. And then last week we saw Prodigious Bay win, stretching out for the first time with a really nice 105 TimeformUS speed figure. A real improvement for him. So it has been a productive race. So it's not a concern thinking that maybe that wasn't a good maiden race. It definitely was.
Yeah, for sure. Edgemont Road was actually pretty impressive coming back next time. Let's move on to the next race in this pick 5 sequence. It's the 8th race, the Count Fleet Handicap Grade 3 event going 6 furlongs. And this one has really drawn an intriguing cast of sprinters, some horses that are proven at this graded stakes level, some that are moving up in class. I guess let's start the conversation. Well, let's go in morning line order. We'll begin with the morning line favorite, who I believe is Bobby's Wicked One. He's 3-1. I'm sorry, it's Whitmore, who's 5-2 on the morning line. Whitmore, I think, probably will be the favorite in this race. He's a horse who has a real affinity for Oaklawn, and he's won plenty of stakes here. I think he's won even this race in the past. He was second last year to Mitoli in the Count Fleet, but he won the Hot Springs last time over an inferior field, but he did it the right way. He's capable of running higher speed figures in the above 120, even though he hasn't done it recently. I think Whitmore just makes a ton of sense in this race.
Yeah, I think he's clearly the horse to beat. I mean, he was 3rd in the Breeders' Cup Sprint just last year. He is getting older, but he's not really showing the signs that he's losing it or anything. He's still running fast races. Last time looks a little slow on the speed figure scale, but there wasn't a lot of pace in there. He kind of got caught in behind the speed, but he just forced his way through like the old pro that he is and still found a way to get the job done. But that said, there's a couple horses that interest me in here that I may take a shot with. It just depends on the tote board. And the first one is the horse you mentioned, Bobby's Wicked One. This horse, this is a race where the pace projector thinks the pace will be hot. It's a big field of 11. There is plenty of speed, but I just think he's the horse who is the speed of the speed in here. He is shown on a clear lead in the pace projector. And I don't really have any argument with that. He runs faster early than some of the other speeds we have in here, like Mr. Jägermeister, Share the Upside, and even Hidden Scroll, who is, certainly adds some intrigue to this race. But I think he's the fastest, and at this 6 furlong distance, he's going to be really tough to reel in. Another horse that interested me in here is Hog Creek Hustle. He's a proven closer. If the race does start to fall apart late, he's a Grade 1 winner. He's done it in big races several times. The one concern with him is the 6 furlongs might just be a little bit too short. He probably appreciates the 7 furlongs or even 1 turn mile a bit more, but if it gets hot enough, he's certainly going to be flying through the lane. So those were the 2 I left. I'm not so that I'd be more against in here. Horses I kind of look for to eliminate the takeout. One is Flagstaff, shipping in from Southern California. He's been super consistent out there. He runs basically a 120 TimeformUS speed figure every time, give or take a point or two. But I just don't think the sprint division out in Southern California has been very strong for the past year. He's been beating up on horses who probably wouldn't be considered contenders in here, so I want to take a shot against him. And the other one is Hidden Scroll. as talented as I think he is, he's just a horse who hasn't proven it to me yet. He hasn't had to face fast horses like this and be able to hang on. He looked impressive in his comeback win, but as a horse who we know is going to get bet, I'm willing to take a shot against him.
So we agree on a lot here. The one place that we don't agree is I'm against Bobby's Wicked One in this race. I don't like this horse. I know that he's coming in with a couple of TimeformUS speed figures that point him out as clearly the horse to beat. He's got a 129 last time, 128 two back. Those are by far the highest numbers in the field, and even got a 129 going back to last year when he was second to Matoli in that Churchill Down Stakes. It's just Bobby's Wicked One. So many times he's had these really favorable setups. Not that he's been setting slow paces per se, but he's just been the lone speed in so many races. That was the case in that Commonwealth that he won at Keeneland last year. It was definitely the case in his last two starts at the Fairgrounds when, I mean, he beat two horses each time. I mean, this is a much more competitive race that Bobby's Wicked One is entering. And I always want to be skeptical of horses that are able to post these gigantic speed figures when they have everything go their own way. Also, Bobby's Wicked One is a horse that just loves the Fairgrounds. He's 5 of his 6 career wins have come at the Fairgrounds. He's 1 for 9 everywhere else. I know that he ran well in that race at Churchill Downs last year, but that Churchill Downs Stakes, again, it was a race that was pretty much dominated towards the front end. Nobody did any closing in there. I mean, even Promises Fulfilled, who was kind of going the wrong way at that time, he held on for third. I don't know. I think there's going to be a competitive pace in this race. I've got to think Mr. Jägermeister is going. Hidden Scroll has got to go. And from the outside, Share the Upside. We've talked about him quite a bit. He's a horse that really needs the lead to be effective. So I've got to think that Florent Giroux is going to try to send him. I don't know if he's quick enough to get on terms with Bobby's Wicked One in the early going, but I just think they're going to be moving. And maybe he is the speed of the speed. At a short price, he's just not for me. He's the horse that I would kind of toss in the multi-race wagers. We agree on Hog Creek Hustle. I'm going to make him my top pick in this race. I'm not so concerned about the 6 furlongs. I know he hasn't done it that often, but I actually think he's run pretty well at 6 furlongs a number of times in the past. His Breeders' Cup effort was really pretty good. He didn't get off that well that day, closed effectively in the late stages. I know he finished 6th, but he was only about a length behind Whitmore at the end of that race. So I think that Hog Creek Hustle, he was taking a step forward at the end of last year, and I think his 2 starts so far in 2020, they haven't been ideal setups. A mile is just a little bit far for him last time in the Gulfstream Park Mile. And then 2 back, he was in that uncompetitive race that Bobby's Wicked One just wired on the front end. So I think Hog Creek Hustle is going to get a more favorable pace setup this time. And I do think he's good enough to win this race. Hidden Scroll is kind of the most difficult call for me because on one hand, I do think he really has the talent to beat a field like this. He's also probably not a horse that I want to bet in this race because I do think he's going to take quite a bit of money. And I don't have total confidence that 6 furlongs is ultimately going to be the best distance for him where he can really shine against graded stakes horses. They debuted him at a mile last year. The intention was always to have this horse go longer. They're focusing on sprints now, mostly because he got involved in some fast paces and faded last year. I still feel like he's going to ultimately be more of a miling type, not a 6 furlong type of horse, just because I don't know if he's going to be quick enough to keep up in the early going of this race. So I'd love to see Hidden Scroll beat this field because I do think he's that talented. I just can't bet him at a short price in this race. I'll probably use him as a backup in multi-race wagers. The other horse that I would want to take a shot with more is like a B or a C type in the pick 5 and more underneath in intra-race wagers is the number 11 Nitrous. If you're going to make a case for Hog Creek Hustle at, I don't know if he's going to be 15-1, but he's going to be, the biggest price of the contenders we're talking about. Nitrous might be twice the price of Hog Creek Hustle in this race. And last year, Nitrous was basically the same horse as Hog Creek Hustle. They finished right together in a number of those races, and he was off for a long time. They tried the turf at the end of his campaign last year. I don't really know why. But look at the step forward that Hog Creek Hustle took in the speed figures late last season. Why can't Nitrous take that same step forward from the summer of his 3-year-old season now to the spring of his 4-year-old season? Steve Askus' the numbers off layoffs are just okay, but I think he's going to get the right pace set up, and he could be charging late and get a piece of this, so I'll use Nitrous somewhere at a big price.
Yeah, he would be on my tickets as well. I was going to make the same point. Him and Hog Creek Hustle hooked up a few times. They were pretty close. You could even argue that Nitrous could have easily been put up above Hog Creek Hustle when that one appeared to come out and foul Nitrous. So I have no problem with that pick. My one concern is Steve Asmussen off the layoff. He doesn't usually send them out cranked up, but in a case like this where you expect the hot pace, I can certainly see it. I do want to get back to Bobby's Wicked One. If he's around where his morning line is, he wouldn't be my top pick. Hog Creek Hustle would be. But I just suspect he's probably going to go off in the 9-2 to 5-1 range when all is said and done. That's why I liked him a little bit more. But that's why you got to watch the Toad. I think we're going to talk about a few races with some pretty questionable morning lines in my mind. So I can't take what I see in the morning line here seriously. I've just seen too many bad ones, and I'm trying to project what I think they're going to be, but ultimately we'll see before we have to go to the window.
Yeah, I think this is one where you definitely want to watch the board. I don't feel like I have a good feel for how they're going to bet this race. Typically, I would criticize the morning line and say that I know that Bobby's Wicked One is going to be a bigger price. I'm not sure in this race. There are a number of horses they could bet. We'll see how the track is playing that day. Sometimes that influences things at Oaklawn. But I don't know. I could see Bobby's Wicked One, Whitmore, or Hidden Scroll all being the favorite in this race. I just don't know how they're going to bet it. One horse I didn't mention that you talked about was Flagstaff, and I just want to say I've got pretty much the same take as you. And when I first looked at this race, I thought, oh, Flagstaff is going to trip out perfectly behind the speeds. He's going to get first run on Bobby's Wicked One. Maybe he'll be able to win the race. I just don't know if Flagstaff is this good. He hasn't really stepped forward above that 120 mark on the speed figure scale. Don't love that older sprint division in California. So I was kind of with you that I downgrade him a little bit. Let's move on to the 9th race, which is the middle of this pick 5 sequence. It's an optional claiming race, $50,000, also an allowance condition for horses that have not won a certain amount of money in the past year or so. It's going 6 furlongs. This is a one where the favorite on the morning line is Break Even, and I suspect you're going to agree with me here. Break Even is not the most trustworthy favorite in this race. First of all, her last race was terrible, and it was off a long layoff, so you have to wonder if she can run anymore. And second of all, there's a fast pace projected in this race, and I've got to think they're going to be moving on the front end because there are plenty of horses in here that really need the early lead to be successful, and Break Even is one of them. I just don't know if she's going to be able to get the right trip in here.
Yeah, I hate to be that guy, but I have to correct you. Shanghai Tariff is actually the morning line favorite, which is one of the more questionable ones that I saw. I find it very hard to believe that horse will actually go off the favorite in this race, but Break Even is a close second choice. She's 3-1 on the morning line. This is an optional 50,000 claimer, but the best I could tell, nobody's entered for the tag. So this is one of those old school conditioned allowance races where you just have to meet a certain set of conditions. It's not a non-winners of. And in this big field of 12, the pace projector has it labeled as a fast pace, and it's really hard to argue that with Break Even and Mount Brave in here. These are two of the fastest females in the country in the beginning of a sprint race. They hooked up last time. They both dueled each other into defeat, and it's kind of hard not seeing that play out again because they're both horses that really need the lead. They're both really fast. And that's also a big part of why I think Shanghai Tariff has very little chance. She's a horse who also likes to run up near the front, and she's not near as fast as these. She doesn't have a speed rating lately that is even close enough to win this race, so I'm definitely against her. The one horse I wound up landing on was Heaven's Whisper. She's a horse who's been in really good form since being claimed by Paul Holthouse, I guess, Holtis. And she's won her last 2. She has the ideal style for a setup like this. She'll have to improve her speed figure, but the way she's won the last couple times, she looks like one that can do it. She sat up within striking range of a fast pace a couple back. She was off a slow pace last time, and it's proved that either one she was able to handle. So she's the one I like the most in here, and I'm just going to try to beat the favorites for sure, particularly Break Even and Shanghai Tariff.
Yeah, I remember noting that Break Even wasn't the morning line favorite when I first handicapped this race, and it just didn't make any sense to me that I guess I kind of changed the facts in my head before I started that opening intro. But yes, Shanghai Tariff is the morning line favorite. I agree with your take on her. There is a ton of speed in this race. As you can see in the pace projector, she's not projected to be on the lead, and I think that's going to be pretty tough on her, especially since she's breaking from the rail to get the right trip. Maybe she can stalk the pace. I just don't know if she's good enough to beat this field. Break Even, I'll use her maybe a little bit defensively, but I really wanted to take a stand against her in this race. This is one where I think you do have to spread a little bit because it's hard to really sink your teeth into one contender because they all look so similar on the speed figures. I guess if you're talking about trips, horses that could trip out are definitely the one you mentioned, Heaven's Whisper. I have no problem with her. She loves to win races. It seems like she's improved since this claim three back. So she's definitely a contender in my book. The 5 Meadow Dance is another one that could get the right trip for Brad Cox. She's one of the shorter prices on the morning line. My issue with her is that if she does have to get a little bit faster, I know she was second in some stakes recently, but she was no match for Ladies Island last time. And then 2 back, she was no match for Mia Mischief. So she's kind of just been picking up pieces. And I feel like she's going to take money based on those company lines when she's not really more likely to win this race than some others who have been facing weaker company. The number 4, Headland, I think, has a similar look to Heaven's Whisper. They've got very similar running styles. And I know she was beaten by Heaven's Whisper last time, but prior to that, I thought Headland ran well to be third in that race over a fast track back in February. So I would use her. Mentioning a lot of horses here and haven't even gotten to my top pick yet, but the one that I would be leaning towards taking a shot with on top is the number 10, Take Charge Angel. I don't think we're going to get 12-1 on this horse. That seems like maybe double the price that she should be. But Take Charge Angel is a horse that, while she does have speed, she can be effective stalking the pace, and at least she's drawn outside of all of the other speeds. So she's not going to have to take any dirt in her face. I like that. So there's the chance she could work out the right trip. And on occasion, this horse has shown that she's maybe faster than some others in here. She earned some speed figures last year in the TimeformUS scale that were well above 110. She did that when she won that allowance race at Churchill Downs back in June, beating the very good Irish Mischief. She was dueling with Kofefi after that in the Dogwood. She really didn't have any chance that day given the trip that she got, but she came back with a good race at Keeneland. I liked her effort last time at Turfway Park. I know it was over synth, but I'm not even sure that she likes the synth. She's a better dirt horse, and I just feel like she might have a bit of a talent edge on this field if she shows up and gets the right trip. So if she's in that 6 to 7-1 range, she's a horse that I'd want to take a shot with.
I find that one interesting because as I looked through her PPs yesterday, and she was similar to Shanghai Tariff for me in that she's only run well on or near the lead. The one thing is the post could help her quite a bit. As you said, she could just sit off of the speed horses and kind of inherit the speed if they collapse. So if the posts were reversed, I would be particularly against Take Charge Angel, but I think drawing outside does give her a chance. Meadow Dance was a similar horse. As I look through it, it's easy to see her last 2 running lines and think she might be off the pace a little bit and kind of get a good setup. But as you scroll further down, all of her good races are right on or near the lead. So at a short price, I didn't want any parts of her.
Yeah, it's something that I struggle with in handicapping. When there's so much pace in a race and there's no obvious closer, I kind of always end up going back to the speed horses and just focusing on the horse that I think is the best in the race. Because even a horse like Heaven's Whisper, she's not really a deep closer. And you look at the pace projector, and Heaven's Whisper is projected to be all the way back in like 10th or 11th early. And she's not really accustomed to coming from that far back. She's more of a stalking type. And there's just so much speed in this race. I get a little worried that some of these horses that have the higher late pace ratings might just be having to come from farther off the pace than they're really accustomed to. And the 2 horses with the best late pace ratings in the race are 30-1 shots. So I don't really like them. So I just ended up going back to the horse that I think might be the most talented.
Yeah, I have no problem with that. You make a great point about these races because often, especially in sprints, when there's a whole lot of speed, the winner winds up being the one that survives more than a horse that kind of runs them down late. It's just tough to win at these shorter distances coming from way back, which is why I mentioned Heaven's Whisper does have some good tactical speed. But as you mentioned, there's no guarantee. The pace projector shows she's never really run fast enough to stay within striking distance. So it's kind of a guessing game in these situations. And it's just a really interesting handicapping race, and the kind I really like to sink my teeth into. And just got to kind of watch the odds and look for the overlays. It's funny you mentioned the horses with the best late pace rating. I'm actually probably going to find a way to play some superfectas with my sister Maddie, who's 30-1 on the morning line back in third and fourth, because I don't think she's good enough to win, but she's going to be a huge price, and she looks like a kind that almost for sure will be further back and finishing late. It's probably a bit of a stretch, but with only dime superfectas, if you can get some chaos up front and you key on a big horse, you can get some big prices that way.
Yeah, I can't argue with that opinion. I mean, it's hard to make a horse like her win the race, but we've often seen races like this when they go too fast up front, they just end up falling apart behind, and inferior horses are able to get minor pieces. So she's definitely a horse you could throw into the mix underneath. Let's move on to the feature race on this card. It's the fourth race in this pick 5 sequence, the 10th race on the card, the Apple Blossom Handicap, going a mile on the 16th, grade 1 event for the older fillies and mares. And this has really drawn some of the best, maybe all of the best fillies and mares in the country outside of Midnight Bisou. They're in this race. We've got a ton of horses that already have grade 1 victories on their resumes. I won't get it wrong this time. The morning line favorite is listed as the number 4, Come Dancing. I think that's highly unlikely. Come Dancing is a horse that we do have to discuss in this race because she's one of the ones who's fast enough to win. I just don't think she's really at her best going this far. She's never gone 2 turns before. She's coming off a poor race in the Breeders' Cup, awful layoff for a new trainer. I just think there are a lot of things working against Come Dancing here. So I wanted to focus on the more proven commodities in these route races.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. This is one of the morning lines I was talking about. I don't think there's any way Come Dancing is going to be the favorite, given all the things that you said. I don't like her in here, so tossing her, it wouldn't matter if she was 12-1 or 3-1 on the morning line. I just don't think this is a good spot for her at all. So I'm going to be against her. It's sad to say this is the first Apple Blossom I'm going to miss in person in a while. But in years past, while it always drew strong fields, the field size has been pretty limited. Just going off the top of my head, we've usually had some strong. Midnight Bisou won it last year off over a really good field, but I think it was only 5 or 6 horses in there. So this is quite a change here with a giant field of 14. They are allowing all 14 to run. They limit it to 12 in other races, but I guess for stakes, 14 is fine. It's hard to imagine the pace isn't going to be hot in here, given some of the speed. And of course, Serengeti Empress, who always goes fast. She does look to be the speed of the speed in here, just like she did in the Azari. But I think this is going to be much tougher. The competition is going to come at her sooner. It's going to be better horses doing so. And I just think she's the second or third choice. I forget. I think she's 4-1 on the morning line. But she's going to have a tougher time. And we could go through and probably talk about most of the horses in here and having a chance, but I'll talk about the 2 that I particularly like. Actually, there's 3 I'm focusing on. The first one is Street Band. I don't think there's any way we're going to get near the 15-1 morning line. She is on the morning line, but I really didn't like the way she was ridden last time. She was kind of in an uncomfortable position, close up, chasing Serengeti Empress. It was probably the right tactic for that day, knowing she was going to be clear on the lead, but it just didn't work out. She didn't handle it well. She faded late, so I'm willing to put a line through that one. If she reverts to her old tactics and just makes a 1 late run, I think she's got a big shot. The other horse, another horse I like is CC. I know she draws the far outside post in this 14-horse field, but given the way I think this field's going to get strung out with the fast pace, I don't think it's as big of a concern as it would be if it was more a tactical race with not a whole lot of speed. I think she has enough tactical speed to be able to move in, find a good position, and she's just really hit her top form lately. She seems to be improving, running a better race every time. So I think she's got a real big shot. And another horse at a price that I like in here is Point of Honor, who was a really good 3-year-old filly last year. She never quite won the big race. She was second, I believe, to Guarana, second behind Dunbar Road. But she ran some good, fast races. her comeback at Tampa, that one for me is just the total line through. She came back in a sprint. There was no pace whatsoever in the field. She ran okay to be second. I know she was the heavy favorite, but that race obviously wasn't a target of anything other than to get her some exercise. So I think she's sitting on a big race as well. And those are the ones I want to take a shot with against Serengeti Empress and I guess Come Dancing, if you consider her a major contender in here.
Yeah, we have very similar feelings on this race. I would say the Serengeti Empress is likely to be the favorite in here, just based on her big win over the track last time and the fact that she's got all of these prior speed figures that make her fast enough to win this race. The real question with her, I think, is what does Cookie Dough do right to her inside? Because I don't think horses like Ollie's Candy and Emma are quite fast enough to go with Serengeti Empress early. But Cookie Dough has sprinter speed, and if Abel Cedillo wants to go, he can really send her after Serengeti Empress early. So I think it's going to be an interesting chess match early between Cedillo and Joe Talabo on Serengeti Empress to see how fast they go on the front end, because that's really going to determine Serengeti Empress's fate, because she can go fast and finish off a race, but maybe not in a race like this that has some quality closers. So I would definitely use Serengeti Empress because she's obviously good enough to win this race. It just depends on how taxing the early pace is. We're on the same page about Street Band. We talked about her trip last time in the Azeri. Just really wasn't the right setup for her. She's also a horse that I don't think loves a sloppy track, and she got that last time. She's going to probably be back on a fast track on Saturday, and she typically does best when Sophie Doyle takes her farther back in the early going. I have to think that's going to be the plan in the Apple Blossom. She got that kind of trip in the Cotillion, which featured a fast pace, and she was able to beat Serengeti Empress and the best 3-year-old fillies of her generation last year on that day. So I just think Street Band makes a lot of sense here, and what's a fair price for you on Street Band? I know she's 15-1 in the morning line, and we're saying that's a bad morning line. I would say that Street Band is supposed to be about 7-1 in this race.
Yeah, I was going to say in the 6-1 to 8-1 range. I'd probably want 8-1. 6-1 might be too low. If I got 7, I would take it. 6 would probably be a little too low for me. It's another one where I think I know I knocked the morning line, but it was a tough race to make the morning line. I'm not going to give the morning line maker too much grief because nothing would really surprise me when the betting opens up. I think the wagering could go in a lot of different directions. I did want to talk about Serengeti Empress. You mentioned Cookie Dough, and I certainly think she is a key to the race, what they decide to do with her. But I also think Come Dancing, who's trying 2 turns, well, I don't think she's going to be right up on the lead early. I do think she is more than likely to make an early move, perhaps, early on the back stretch or approaching that second turn, and just give Serengeti Empress that challenge that she didn't get last time.
Yeah, the one concern with Come Dancing and that strategy is that she does have that nagging issue where she just walks out of the gate and lets the field leave before she does. And that could be a big problem in a 14-horse field, even going a route distance. You don't want to have a poor start in a race like this. So we'll see if that rears its head for Come Dancing. She doesn't always break slowly, but it seems like it started happening more often than not last year. So it's something to be aware of. I do also want to mention CC, who you brought up briefly. If she had a better post, I would have no qualms about picking her on top. I do think that CC could trip out in this race if she gets over from that wide draw. That's a big if because post 14 is way out there. But as you said, there are some horses that really have to go to the front, some that are going to go right to the back. So there is a chance that maybe she could tuck over and get 3 wide into that clubhouse turn. I think that might be good enough for her. She certainly was able to lose ground last time in the Beholder Mile and still be at a good field. And I don't think the mile and the 16th is supposed to be a major hurdle for her. I mean, that I like this horse, and I think she's got a ton of quality, so I'm not going to be shocked if she's good enough to overcome all of that and beat this field. We'll see what price she is. If she's around that 7-2 morning line, I think that's pretty fair on her, so I definitely want to focus on her and Street Band. As for the others, they're more of backups for me. As I said, Serengeti Empress would be one. I'd also want to throw in Ollie's Candy underneath. She's got a much better post than CC, and I think her last race in the Beholder Mile looks like in retrospect, maybe it was just a prep race for this because she didn't seem like she was fully cranked that day. I watched one of her workouts on XBTV since then. It seems like she's really come to hand coming out of that Beholder Mile. She ran some pretty good races last year against some of the better fillies in California. Her Breeders' Cup distaff was actually fine. She's another one who could trip out in this race, kind of like you would hope that Cece would have if she had drawn an inside post position. So I don't want to totally dismiss Ollie's Candy. Probably not good enough to win, but I'll use her as a backup and sort of underneath in exotics.
Yeah, I have no problem with her. She certainly looks to get a decent trip from that rail post. Just a couple others I want to mention in here because, what else have we got to talk about? We might as well spend plenty of time on the Apple Blossom. Horologist comes into this race with a really big 124 TimeformUS speed figure. People might wonder why I'm not using her. She's a horse who runs her best races up near the lead. The win, or she actually didn't win last time. She was second behind Arafana, a really promising horse in Maryland. But it was a one-turn mile. It was a race that just wasn't all that strong outside the top two. It was a virtual match race. And those kind of races tend to lead to big speed figures, and I just don't see her reproducing it in here. The other horse I might include just depends on the odds board in my vertical bets. Of course, if I play a pick five, I would have to decide beforehand, is Lady Apple. She ran a couple huge races at the end of last year and early this year. And if you look back through her PPs, her two really bad races that both come over sloppy tracks. All the others she's run well. I know she broke her maiden on a sloppy track, but that was going 6 furlongs quite a while ago. So it's always possible she has an excuse and just doesn't like the slop anymore. But she does draw the 13 post, so I'm not overly enthused with her as a horse who likes to be close up. But she is one I would consider at a price.
Yeah, I was actually going to briefly mention Lady Apple too, because there are horses that will fall through the cracks in this race because there are so many ways to go, and it feels like she might be one of them because she could be every bit of that 15-1, and she's got some prior speed figures that make her competitive here. I do want to address one horse that you talked about that I didn't mention, Point of Honor. She's 10-1 on the line. I don't know how they're going to bet this race with regard to certain horses, but she is a horse that just seems to always take more money than I think that she's supposed to. She's never run a particularly fast race, and while I get that she's probably going to get the right setup here, I've always felt that Point of Honor is a horse that does better with more distance. And even last year when she was stepping up into these races, a mile and a 16th always felt like it was a little bit short for her. She really shined going a mile and an eighth in the coaching club, especially a mile and a quarter in the Alabama. I know that last time was just a prep and she's going to improve out of that race. I just feel like she's the kind of horse that's going to attract a lot of money based on the fact that she's likely to improve. And I just don't know if she's quite this good. To me, she's more of an underneath kind of horse and not really a win candidate, but perhaps I'll be wrong about that.
Yeah, I don't want any part of her if she's not double-digit odds, to be fair. And I totally agree with you about the distance. I just thought maybe that if there's a pace meltdown, as it looks like it's possible, it could help her. But I would still prefer Street Band in that case.
Let's close things out with the final race on this Oaklawn card on Saturday. It's the 11th, and it's another head scratcher. Claiming 50,000 down to 45,000, going a mile and a 16th, same distance as the Apple Blossom. And we've got plenty of familiar names in this race. Older horses with prior stakes form that have probably lost a step in their older age. I think a number of horses that actually Chad Brown used to train in stakes races and now are in different barns. Two of those are drawn down towards the inside, Timeline and Kurlov. They're the two shortest prices on the morning line, though I kind of feel like another ex-Chad Brown horse, Matru, is going to be favored over them. Of all of these horses that I just mentioned, I would kind of lean towards Matru. I feel like he's got the most tactical speed of all of these horses, and I don't see that much early speed in this race outside of the number 3 Curlin Rules. And I just feel like Matru, even though he's 10 years old and he's not the graded stakes horse that he once was, he's still capable of running some pretty fast speed figures, certainly fast enough to win this race. And I think he's going to trip out stalking the early speed. Last time out, I know he lost as the 2-5 favorite. That was not Orlando Mojica's finest ride. He somehow was able to get into trouble in a 5-horse field. Matru clearly should have won that race, so I'm not going to put too much stock in that defeat. I just feel like he's been in good form since the claim by Robertino Diodoro, and he's good enough to beat this field.
Yeah, this is a race. I'll just say right off the bat, in the pick five, I'm definitely going to spread. I don't love anybody in here. It's a big field of 12 with a couple AEs. I do think you have to watch the AEs and see if Hunka Burning Love, who we both liked last week, he did make the lead as we hope, but he just didn't finish off the race. But if he draws in, he could certainly change the outlook on the front. Curlin Rules is projected to get an easy lead, but he had that last time going shorter, and he still wasn't able to close the deal. So not a big fan of his. But, outside of that, I don't have a lot of big opinions. I don't love Matru. He could certainly win here. Like you said, the whole world saw his trip last time, being there's only like 4 tracks running these days. Pretty much most horse players are watching every race and commenting on trips. So I'm not sure you're going to get any value off his last trip, as everybody knows about it. He can win, no doubt. I don't love anyone, and I'll be spreading. That's about all I can say about this race.
Yeah, when I first looked at this race, I thought I was going to have that same take, but there are other places in this sequence that I want to spread, and I feel like this might be one of the races where I narrow things down a little bit, because I really do think Matru is going to get the right trip here, and I think he's going to be the favorite, and I think he should be the favorite, so I'm not expecting to get that 5-1 on him. He's just the horse that I would tentatively lean on here. Another horse that I want to mention is the number 5, DeGrom. He's coming in to Oaklawn Park from Laurel for David Fox, first off a trainer change, but he had been in pretty good form at Laurel recently. If you look at the PPs of the horses he faced in that 1.25 mile race last time, Jafazo has gotten really good lately. That was a tough field, and I think off that performance, he stacks up pretty well against this group. He is another one that has a little bit of tactical speed, so I think he could work out the right trip. I preferred those two to Timeline and Kurlov, who I just don't think are nearly as good as they once were. So I was a little bit against them, and I would just try to probably get alive to the 5 and 10 in this last leg and feel okay about it.
Yeah, I agree with you about Kurlov. We talked last week about suck-up figures. He got a 110 last time, running behind Pirates Punch back and forth, but he really didn't do any running in that race. He made a little bit of a mid-race move before dropping back after not showing much early speed. So just if people are wondering an example, I've actually pointed out a couple on Twitter. That's a 110 I'm not taking too serious. I think he'd be more likely to run the low hundreds like he did in his 2 wins prior.
Yeah, we're on the same page about that. And these horses just aren't what they once were. So maybe they'll rebound in this race to remember who they were. But you got a lot of horses who just seem to be at a stage in their careers where their form is tailing off, and he's one of them. So that's a look at this entire pick 5 sequence. We went through it and discussed a lot of horses. Just to kind of recap, Craig, is there any place where you'd look to narrow things down a little bit, or a race that you're kind of thinking about keying on here? Or is it just mostly a spread throughout for you and hope to get lucky?
Well, the first race, I'm really going to focus on Desmond. Maybe I'll use Wild Poppet just a little bit. So I'm not going to go very wide in that first race at all. And in the Apple Blossom, I'm going to keep it the 2 main A horses, and then maybe use Point of Honor just a little bit as like a B or a C. I'll focus on Street Band in there and CC. Those will be the 2 I focus on there. So those 2 races, I'm not going to spread very wide.
Yeah, we're the same in the Apple Blossom, and I'd view the last race as one where I can narrow it down a little bit and just hopefully get alive that far, because it won't be easy. Well, hopefully we give out some good ideas for you this week, and we can make some scores on Saturday at Oaklawn Park. It's a fun card, and I'm sure we'll both be tweeting about it in real time as it happens. So, Craig, always fun to talk about these races. Remember that you can listen to us, both of our podcasts, the TimeformUS Pacecast and the TimeformUS Forecast, on drf.com, Spotify, iTunes, YouTube, and SoundCloud. Wherever you get your podcast, just make sure to subscribe to the Daily Racing Form channel. So thanks for listening this week, and we'll be back on Tuesday with the TimeformUS Pacecast to discuss and recap these stakes races from Saturday at Oaklawn.